Hello there guys, and welcome back to another video, and today is going to be a different video. Here, as you can see, it is dark in my house, but today we are going to be looking at the past, the lost and forgotten railroad lines of southern Illinois. One of the most popular railroad towns in southern Illinois is Centralia, Illinois. Featuring the former Illinois Central Main Line of Mid-America, the BNSF Beardstown Subdivision, and the Norfolk Southern Southwest District, the former SOU. But did you know that Centralia, Illinois had 4 railroad lines there at one point? There is a forgotten railroad line that ran through Centralia about 40 years ago, and that was the old Missouri and Illinois line. Originally, the line had ran from Salem, Illinois, all the way to Chester, Illinois. This would be a line to connect between the Salem subdivision and the Chester subdivision. And that would kind of be used as like a reroute line, like if there's flooding or if a train derails on one of those lines. This other line could be used as a backup line. Since this was a line used for reroutes, it wasn't a very busy line at all, but there were still a couple trains a day on that line. I do believe there was a local that would work in Salem and Centralia. Not much remains of the lines are left though. Why did this line go out of service? It's probably because of the Pinckneyville Subdivision. Because the Pinckneyville Subdivision also is a reroute line for the Salem Subdivision and the Chester Sub. This other old Missouri Pacific line was just out of it, just in worse condition. But since the Pinckneyville Sub was born, they just decided to leave this line. There isn't much knowledge to know about this line. Hardly anyone ever knows about this line. All I know is that the line was shut down in either the late 80s or the early 90s. But there were a good amount of railroads that owned the line. The Centralia and Chester Railroad had owned it in the 1880s, and then the Illinois Southern Railroad took over. Then Missouri and Illinois took over the line, and then Missouri Pacific had the line. And then, once it was acquired by Union Pacific in 1982, the line was still open in the mid to late 80s. So Union Pacific had this line for a short amount of time, but it wasn't for very long. As a matter of fact, there are no photos of trains on this line when Union Pacific had it. Finding a photo of a train on this old Missouri Pacific line is very rare. There are almost no photos of trains on the Missouri Pacific line on the internet. It's because the line wasn't very busy and there weren't very many chances to catch a train on there since it was not that much of a busy line. You can't find a photo anywhere on Railroad Picture Archives in Centralia. You can't find one. You can't find one on Flickr. However though, one day I was scrolling through on Facebook and I finally found some. I found 4 different photos of the Missouri Pacific trains in Centralia, Illinois, out by the old Gilster Mary Lee. You know, the BNSF Industrial Park Local YCEI 101 is actually works on the site of where the old Missouri Pacific used to run. The old Missouri Pacific would branch off and head west right next to Gilster Mary Lee, and it would head west out of Centralia through Nashville, Coulterville, Oakdale, all the way till it got up to Chester. And right here, as you can see, this is the remains of the old Missouri Pacific train yard in Salem, Illinois. There is evidence though. Right here, as you can see, is a piece of railroad track. This is one of the only remaining evidence left of Missouri and Illinois in Salem of the old train yard. A new business is going to be taking over where the train yard was. So that evidence is probably going to be gone soon, but I got it. Not only that, if you go to 800 S Marion Ave, You can also see 2 boxcars being stored there. There are still tracks where the boxcars are at, but after that, the tracks are just gone. So those boxcars ain't going nowhere for a very long time. I remember one time being in Centralia, Illinois, January of 2020. And I heard a train horn out in the distance, and it sounded like it was coming from south of me. I was standing by the train station, and south of me I heard a horn, and I thought a train was coming, but there was just, and the signals were off, and these 4 signals would only turn on when a train would get into the block. But the crazy thing was, those signals were on, but no train came. There was no train to be seen. However, though, the signals still turned on and a horn was blowing, but there was no sign of a train anywhere. It sounded like it was coming from the CN. Nothing. The CN was dead. Could this have been a ghost of a Missouri Pacific train going through Centralia? We'll never know. I do believe in ghost trains in that they are real, and that could be what I was hearing. Next up on our list is the Nickel Plate Road Cloverleaf Division. Most of the railway is abandoned, and it ran from St. Louis to Frankfort, Indiana. Originally, though, it ran from St. Louis only to Edwardsville, Illinois, and was actually built as a narrow gauge line in 1882, then was converted into a standard gauge line in 1889, and built the rest of the way to Frankfort, Indiana. The line was ran by the Nickel Plate Railroad until the entire NKP company was absorbed by the Norfolk and Western in 1964. Part of the N&W abandoned section of the track of the line between Frankfort, Indiana and Metcalfe, Illinois in the 1960s. The Norfolk and Western then merged with the Southern Railway in 1982 to form the Railroad Norfolk Southern, and they chose to abandon the majority of the line in early 2001. Some examples were between Neoga, Illinois to Coffeen, Illinois, also between Sorrento, Illinois and St. Louis, Missouri. However, though, there is one section of the line that is still open today, including the section connecting to the BNSF Beardstown sub at Sorrento, serving a mine in Coffeen, and it's still operated by NS, where NS coal trains 430 and 431 run. There is actually another section from Neoga to Metcalfe, Illinois, which is owned by the Eastern Illinois Railroad. So, if the line was still in service today, it would be owned by Norfolk Southern. Now, Norfolk Southern already has a different line in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is the former Wabash Brooklyn district. Can you imagine rail fanning with 2 different lines owned by the same company? You don't see that very often anymore. The New York Central Big Four Line was built in 1872, a line running from Cairo, Illinois to Vincennes, Indiana. The line was built by a man named Ambrose Burnside, which was a World War II general. That's why the town New Burnside is named after the World War II general Ambrose Burnside. The New York Central Big Four Line had also been contributing to World War II with the emergency pipeline. The New York Central line at one time, I did believe it had passenger trains on the line, like the L&N Shawneetown branch. The New York Central Big Four Line would cross the L&N Shawneetown branch at El Dorado, the L&N St. Louis Division at Carmi, and the B&O Springfield Division at Norris City. At first, the line was originally owned by the Cairo and Vincennes Railroad, but the owners of the line had changed over the years. It was the Wabash, St. Louis, and Pacific, then the New York Central, then it merged with the Pennsylvania Railroad to make Penn Central, then Conrail acquired Penn Central, so Conrail took over the line, then the Southern Railway, and then it merged with Norfolk and Western to create Norfolk Southern, and Norfolk Southern was the last railroad to own this line. And since Norfolk Southern had the line for a little bit, I would assume that the line had closed past 1982. At the time Conrail had owned the line, the tracks were in absolutely terrible shape. Like, I don't even understand how they could run a freaking coal train on that thing. The tracks were in such bad shape. That could be one of the reasons of why the track had went out of service, is because maybe they just couldn't afford to get the track fixed. It was in horrible shape, and those trains were probably running 5 miles an hour on there. Today, though, there aren't really any remains of the NYC. The only part that I know of is that there is a bike trail in El Dorado, which was the NYC. There was also a bike trail in Harrisburg, I believe, where the NYC had also ran. There was also a big freight yard over there. I am unsure on what kind of trains ran on the New York Central line. The only things that I've got down is that at the time the New York Central owned the line, they ran pipeline trains for World War II passenger trains. And when Conrail had owned the line, they ran coal trains and renamed the line to the Conrail-Cairo line. After the Southern Railway took over, the coal trains, I believe, were gone. The only train that ran on the line at that time was a local that would turn around at Karnak. In the vicinity of West Frankfort had coal mines in the area, and there were actually a couple of coal lines that ran through West Frankfort. Today, the only line that runs through West Frankfort today is the Union Pacific Mount Vernon Subdivision. But what not a lot of rail fans knew is that there were two other lines that ran through West Frankfort, including the old Illinois Central Johnston City District, which is now owned by the Crab Orchard and Egyptian Railroad, or the Heron Railroad. However, though, the line no longer goes through West Frankfort, but the line is still in service, barely, in Heron, Illinois, and Marion. Not only that, there was also a Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy coal line. The BNSF Beardstown Subdivision was a busy coal line for coal trains, mixed freight, and intermodals. Today, only coal trains run on the line. But this old CB&Q line that ran through West Frankfort came off of the BNSF Beardstown Subdivision. And you can also see an old Burlington Northern Bridge when driving under Interstate 57 headed through West Frankfort. Alright, so I will go ahead and show you where the old coal lines in West Frankfort ran. So right now we're on the Heron Railroad, which was formerly owned by the Illinois Central. This right here is the former Illinois Central Johnston City District, which the Heron Railroad has a bunch of cars stored at. The line is barely in service out by Heron, but the line no longer runs through West Frankfort. But where did it run? Well, I'm here to show you that. I will also show you where the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy line ran at. But first, we're going to start with the Illinois Central. So, right now, we are on the old Illinois Central, and these are where the cars are stored at. And then after that, the track just pretty much ends. The track just ends, but this track did go up toward West Frankfort. It also went up toward Ziegler, because the line that went up to West Frankfort would split off, and the other line would head up towards Ziegler. And I think it merged with the CN El Dorado sub, but I could be wrong about that. And yeah, right here, this is still the Illinois Central, which I guess it's just pavement now. But as we go up here, as we keep following the line, yeah, see, now it's just a road. And right here is where it split off. This would head up towards Ziegler. Right there, as you can see, this is Ziegler. But right here, this is where the IC would split off and head towards West Frankfort, which the other line headed towards Ziegler was also an IC line. But right here, if we keep following this line of trees, we'll see where the old Illinois Central ran. And right here was a railroad crossing. And now, let's take a look at this. And right here is where an old railroad junction used to be. I'm unsure of the name, but right now, as you can see, we are right outside of West Frankfort right here. And this was an old railroad junction. And there were two different diamonds here at one time. This right here would be the Illinois Central, while this line up here was the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. And this line right here is also a Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy line. This here is the BNSF Beardstown Subdivision, which is still in service. But right here and right here were two other lines. A diamond right about here, and a diamond right here. West Frankfort was a busy railroad town at the time, with 4 lines in consist. They had the BNSF Beardstown Sub, another Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy coal line here, and the old Illinois Central. So as we keep following it, we are now right outside of West Frankfort, and right here is where it would cross the old Interstate 57 bridge. And right here, this might actually be some old railroad track. This could be part of the old railroad track where the IC had ran. But as you can see, the IC just went right south of West Frankfort, I believe. And as you can see, it just kept going on. And right here, this looks like it would curve and head this way into Johnston City. This is the old IC, Johnston City District. And that is where the old IC had ran. So now, let's go back up here, and I'll show you where the old Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy had ran. So right here, as you can see, as we keep on going this way, right here was an old Y. There's this side, and then this side. This was an old Y, and the track would head up this way. And it would curve right, and I do believe it would curve right here. But right here is the old Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, and it would head this way. And if you're driving under I-57 and you see this exit right here, if you're headed this way, you'll notice this right here. And this was the old CB&Q. But right here, you can still see the old Burlington Northern logo on both sides of the bridge, and the bridge is still in the green paint. Right there, as you can see, there's logo number 1, which is a little bit worn off. But then if we go to the other side of the line, you can see right here that there would also be the Burlington Northern logo. Right there. And that is one of the only remains of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy line that ran through here. And this right here is your evidence. This railroad bridge is your evidence. But if we keep on going this way, as you can see, the line would come up right here and cross over the Union Pacific Marion Subdivision. The Union Pacific Marion Subdivision almost isn't used anymore. There are still coal trains that run on the line, but not very often. So right here is the CB&Q, and it would go right about here and cross the UP Marion sub, I'd say right about here, where a diamond used to be. And this is the old Union Pacific Marion Subdivision. West Frankfort has only 2 lines left now, but back then they had 4. I don't know exactly how busy they were. But yeah, and after that, you pretty much can't really see any more remains of the Burlington Northern. It's pretty hard to find right there. But yep, that is it right there. Those are two old forgotten lines that ran through West Frankfort. Alright, so let's take a look at a line that was recently abandoned not too long ago. Not like from the 2000s, but like the late 90s. Anyways, we're going to be looking at the former Chicago and Northwestern SI line. It was a line from St. Louis to Springfield, Illinois. So, Union Pacific acquired the former Chicago and Northwestern SI line between St. Louis and Nelson, Illinois, after it had merged with the Chicago and Northwestern in 1995. Union Pacific decided to rename the SI line as the Madison Subdivision. And for 3 years, the company routed important train traffic over the line, which was mainly empty coal trains and grain trains headed to Nelson to access the C&W Chicago Omaha racetrack. Union Pacific had merged with the Southern Pacific in 1996, which now UP had owned a third parallel route, which was known as the SPCSL between St. Louis and Northern Illinois. The Madison Sub wasn't that bad of a line. It had a solid infrastructure and the trains were able to run at high speeds. However, though, there was a lack of sidings and no signalized traffic control system. So the Union Pacific started observing the Madison Sub. So the specific portion of the line that they decided to eliminate because of duplication was between Madison, Illinois and Springfield, as they determined that the Madison Sub's traffic could be a part of their third route, the SPCSL route. At Springfield, though, in order for trains using the SPCL to access the Madison Sub, Union Pacific decided to build a connection track from the SPCSL to the Illinois and Midland Railway, and then they obtained trackage rights to run over the Illinois and Midland Railway for a few miles to a place in Cantal, Illinois known as Bar, with 2 R's. The construction for the new connection had began in 1996, and by Halloween of 1998, the Surface Transportation Board gave Union Pacific permission to abandon the Madison Sub between Madison and Bar. So traffic pretty much just started taking the SPCSL. And right here is a photo of the last train on the Union Pacific Madison Sub in Edwardsville in 1998. This was the last train ever, and this was a maintenance avoid train, and this train would slowly rip up the rail. This photo right here was taken on Route 159. Today, in Edwardsville, the Union Pacific Madison Sub remains as a bike trail, just like the Nickel Plate Road Cloverleaf Division and the Illinois Terminal. Edwardsville, Illinois has a ton of bike trails, which at one point were all railroad tracks. Now right here, in this photo of the last Union Pacific train on Route 159, I did find a spot of where a bike trail had crossed Route 159, right here. This could have been where the shot was taken at, but I am completely unsure of that, but I'd say that this is my best guess. Alright, well, that is it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed my documentary on the forgotten lines of Southern Illinois. How many lines did you know existed back then, and how many did you not know? I hope you found this interesting. But right there is just some of the old lines that no longer run through Southern Illinois. Anyways, that is it. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss an upload on my channel.